What's the family tea that you found out once you got older?
All right, this is a stitch for me. So, growing up for the first 8 years of my life, I was an only child. And after 8 years, my mother had gotten pregnant again with twins, and they were my sisters. So there's three girls in the family. I we were having a late night dessert one night when I was about 20 years old, and we were just talking about some random stuff, and part of that conversation was about my mother and why she's always in and out of trouble. My uncle very casually, in the middle of the conversation, goes, I wonder if it's because of your brother why your mother acts the way that she does. My brother? And my uncle goes, oh, I don't think I was supposed to say anything. And my grandmother, who's in the other room, goes, nope, you weren't supposed to say anything. So I'm like, well, now you're going to say something because I'm going to know about this. I had found out, basically, my mother had another child about a year after I was born, but she decided she couldn't financially raise both of us, so she gave him up for adoption. She interviewed multiple couples, found a couple that she thought would be best fit to raise her child, and they adopted him. Now, without planning anything, because she didn't keep up with him and they didn't keep up with her about where his life track was going, we ended up finding out they went to the same church that my family went to. So the same church that I grew up in. And that church had a small school. We both went to the same school, and he's in my yearbooks. But we didn't know about each other. So thankfully, nothing weird happened because we just didn't know about each other. We never met each other and forth. And so then we ended up going to the same college. Again, we never met each other, didn't know about each other. I ended up finding out about him through that conversation, and obviously I wanted to meet him. So I arranged a dinner for me, my mother, my sister, him, and his girlfriend, and we all went out to eat. And in the middle of the dinner, his girlfriend was talking about her brother just getting engaged, and she pulls up a picture of him, and as I'm coming back from the bar with drinks, I go, oh, I know him. And he had a very difficult last name, so I said his name, and she just looks at me and goes, how do you know how to say my last name? And I just stare at her. I'm like, he's my husband's best friend. They were in Boy Scouts together. And she goes, that's my brother. Who's your husband? So I say my husband's name. Oh my God, she knew my husband because of her brother, and she was dating my brother, who I just found out about. What?
What's the family tea you found out when you got older?
So this story is about my dad's father, my grandfather. So there's a lot of side notes, so I'm going to break them down for you. Side note number 1, my parents are divorced. Side note number 2, my mom has known my grandfather since high school, so she's had a long history with him. Okay. And side note number 3, my dad's not exactly forthcoming with a lot of things. So this story, I don't think I would have ever found out about it had my mother not said anything. So please, 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 please do not bash her. Okay. So 2 weeks before my grandfather passed away from cancer, okay, my mom was in town because it was being known throughout family that his time was coming. It was only a matter of a week, days, who knew, right? So my mom wanted to come in and say goodbye. So my mom, seeing that I am falling apart, right? Because in my eyes, my grandfather could do no wrong. This man to me was everything. In fact, I spent 2 years while he was in the hospital, every free day I had, instead of going out with my friends or, having the luxury to be able to do things I would like to do, I was in DC visiting him at the hospital, making sure he was okay. So my mom took me to a bar to try to help me decompress, and she told me all these wonderful stories about my grandfather, but she said there was something about him I didn't know that she wanted me to be aware of. So like I said, my parents are divorced, okay? They divorced when I was in my mid-20s, just like when my grandfather divorced my Nana, my dad was also in his mid-20s. And the reason why a divorce happened was after having 3 kids, my Nana exactly was not skinny. So obviously her body went through a lot of changes. My grandfather worked for the government, and so he felt the need to have someone young, skinny, beautiful, who could be a positive influence when he went to social events, you name it, right? There comes in my step-grandmother, the mistress. Yes, he had an affair, apparently. And this went on for a while until I guess he fell in love with her, fell out of love with my Nana, and decided to divorce my Nana to marry the mistress. Okay. Now, he basically started over a new life with her, and they went to adopt my other aunt, who is actually a few years younger than me. So that was the tea. Had I had not known, I think I would have been okay, but it changed some perspectives, but, I still love my grandfather, and I hope, he's doing okay wherever he's at,
That weird family secret that you didn't know about till you were older. I'll go first. So growing up, it was just me and my mom, and I really didn't know my birth dad. About 3 years ago, I got a Facebook message from a lady who claimed to be my babysitter from when I was really little. She was getting in touch with me to let me know I had a sister. Turns out my birth dad had knocked up my babysitter, who was of age, and secretly had a child with her that they had put up for adoption. My sister had known about me my entire life, and I had no clue she even existed. To say my mom was shocked was an understatement. My sister was just scared to tell me that she existed and knew I had no idea. She's a nurse in Tennessee and was adopted by a wonderful family and knows her birth mom and has met our birth dad but wasn't a fan. Takes a special kind of man to keep a whole other child a secret. But I got a pretty cool sister out of it, so not too bad.
What's the family tea you found out once you got older? I'll go first.
So in 2003, my papa, my dad's dad, passed away. From a young age, I always thought oh, papa got sick. There was no family explanation into it. Nobody ever talked about it. Well, when I was in 7th grade, I got a birthday card from my Uncle John, who I had very little memory of, but I remember going and having a sit-down visitation in a library with him, but I never knew why. And I got really, really excited, and I was like, hey, Uncle John sent me a birthday card. And my dad got pissed. And I was like, why would he be pissed that his little brother sent me a birthday card? Why is that such a big deal? So one day I finally asked my mom as to why my dad would get so upset if I brought up my birthday card from my uncle. So my mom asked me, do you remember that time that we went to go visit your Uncle John in that library? And I was like, yeah, I remember. She goes, and that was the last time we saw him, right? I'm like, yeah, I remember. Well, she explained to me that when my papa got sick, come to find out, my uncle had gone through a really tough time in his life and stabbed my papa to death. You heard that right. He stabbed my papa to death. My papa's youngest son, my uncle, stabbed his own father to death. So my mom went through the whole story of exactly what happened from what the police told us. And I remember my mom telling me, saying, at the time, Mercedes and Alora, my cousins, were living with Nana and Papa at the time. And they were actually in the back bedroom when everything went down. So when my uncle called the police and they said, 911, what's your emergency? My uncle said, there's been a murder at blah, blah, blah address. And they said, how do you know that? And he goes, you better hurry before the 2 little girls wake up and find him. And my uncle was found in a ditch the next morning in his car covered in blood. So that's my family tea.
What's the family tea you found out when you got older?
I don't know if I should post this, but I'm going to anyway. So my grandpa on my mom's side used to be a truck driver. And when he left to go to work, my grandma, his second wife, had an affair with my uncle. from his first wife. Now, my grandpa did the math in his head, and he knew when he was gone that my grandma was not pregnant. So she had to have gotten pregnant from somebody else. And when he found out, he was pissed. The only reason why he stayed with my grandma was so that my grandma could take care of him, because my grandpa wouldn't take care of himself. Like, he's very old school, old fashioned, so, you know, the woman takes care of the man. So that's the only reason why he stayed with my grandma. So my aunt is actually my cousin. She's my cousin and my aunt. I did not find this out until after I had my second son. I remember sitting there and my aunts and my cousin were talking about it, and they were talking about like the facial features that they had that were the same, this and that, and it didn't hit me like, well, yeah, y'all guys look alike because we're family. No. It's because my cousin is her half sister. When I found that shit out, I was like, damn. I was told not to talk about it in front of my grandpa, because if I brought it up in front of my grandpa, he would get pissed again. Like, nobody brought it up in front of grandpa. Everybody knew but me. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to say shit because I don't want to make grandpa mad. Shit, I would have been kicked that bitch to the curb. Like, oh, hell no. But that's my family too.